Welcome to our weekly live broadcast where we get to share some tea together, have a little talk about wisdom and life and tea as well. These talks can migrate more and more towards discussions on tea as we start to come out of this crisis. As I said, I've been keeping the discussions more to kind of life wisdom just because I feel like it's necessary at this time to stay connected to what's important in the world and to what this collective adversity offers all of us in terms of opportunities to awake and to practice more. So like the previous few weeks, I think we'll start with a few bowls of tea or a few cups of tea in quiet together. So I hope you all have some tea to enjoy and that you're safe and comfortable and able to sit and enjoy this tea with me. So I hope your 3 bowls were as nice as mine. Today, before we get into questions and answers, I thought I'd offer a little lesson, which I think is very relevant to the situation we all find ourselves in. How it's relevant, you'll have to apply it to your own life and your own situation. But one of the questions that people ask me often when I travel around the world is a pretty common question. And even though the question is relatively mundane, the answer is actually quite deep and applies to all areas of life. But as you already know, all tea lessons are life lessons. So the question is, what's the best tea? Sometimes the question is, what's the best tea for X? But usually it's like, what's the best tea? And the answer is always, there's actually 2 answers I'll unpack. The answer is always, always, always the tea that you're drinking now. The tea that you have now, that is the best tea. That is the real tea. The best wife is your wife. The best son is your son. And that pride is not a pride like a condescending pride. It doesn't carry with it any judgment. When a father looks out at all the boys playing on the pitch, his son might not even be the best athlete. And there might be other boys that are much better, but he's very proud of that boy because that boy is his, because that's the one that God gave to him. And so what this fantasy is addressing is the our tendency to want other than what we have. And the problem with that is that even if we get that other thing, because we have made a mental habit of wanting other than what we have, even when we get that expensive thing, it will very quickly just become part of the landscape, be taken for granted, and on to the next thing. So the best tea is always the one that you have. This relates in a lot of ways. People ask me, what's the best water for tea? I can use this as a very apt analogy because the best water I've ever tasted in terms of tea came from up on the second. The Yunnan is a series of plateaus. The highest plateau in Yunnan is the Tibetan plateau. The plateau just beneath that, there was a mountain spring that was the best water for tea that I've ever tasted. And yet, the water that we gather from the mountain right near here, I love it by far way more. Because this is the water that lives in my life. This is the water that is a part of my tea. This is the water that I have. The best water being on the second highest plateau in Yunnan, so far away from my home, doesn't make sense for me. And you see, even if I got that water somehow shipped here, if I had made a habit of always being critical of the water that I have, knowing in the back of my mind that there's a better water out there, I would not enjoy that water either, because my mind would be oriented towards what are its problems, how do I tear it down, and always seeking something other than what I have. When we learn to seek and appreciate what we have, then when we get more, we can also appreciate that. If we don't learn to appreciate what we have, nothing we get will teach us to appreciate what we have. You cannot learn to appreciate what you have by acquiring more. Acquiring more will not teach you to appreciate what you have. In order to learn to appreciate what you have to learn to appreciate what you have. It has nothing to do with getting more. But that's the scam that the ego presents. That once I get more, then I'll know how to appreciate what I have. When it's just the opposite. not being able to appreciate what you have means getting more, means you won't appreciate what you have at that point either. So certainly there are teas that are thousands and thousands of dollars, even just for one pot, tens of thousands. But they aren't as good as the tea that you're drinking. They aren't as good as the tea that you have, that's a part of your life. Just like there are more gorgeous this or more gorgeous that, better cars, better houses, a better looking wife, but not my wife. I wouldn't trade any of them. This is the one that is mine, and there's no better for me. So the mind loves to be dissatisfied with what is, and think that if only something was added to this moment, then I could appreciate it. But actually that mind, the not now but there, not here but then, I intentionally flop those around. Not here and now, but then and there, I will be happy. That mind itself is the problem, not the absence of the then and there. We are not frustrated by our inability to acquire that situation or that thing. We're frustrated by the mind's frustration. And so we have to learn to appreciate what we have and be where we are, here and now. So the best tea that you have is the tea you're drinking now. You can get twisted up in this all kinds of ways. Sometimes you give someone a bowl of tea and they take a sip and they say, "Oh, I like this tea. I want this tea. Where do I buy this tea?" What do you mean you want it? You can't have it more than you're having it right now. You're literally consuming it into your body. It's not possible for you to be more intimate with this tea than you are right at this moment. Do you mean that you want this cake, these leaves? Because let's be clear about something. You can take this cake home and brew it 100 times, and it will never be this. And if your mind is always on, I want more of this tea, all of those 100 times you brew it, you also won't enjoy. You'll also find problems. Maybe you'll take it home and drink it and say, "Oh, it's not like that time I drank it with Buddha." Of course it's not. That was a different place, a different time. So the best tea is always the one we're drinking right now. And this is a very powerful life lesson. Learn to enjoy what you have, and then getting more means something. If you don't enjoy what you have, but you think that once you get more, you will be able to enjoy what you have, you're wrong. Nothing you get will teach you that. You have to learn to appreciate what you have, and then when you get more, you'll appreciate that too. And when you have less, you'll appreciate that too. That's the power of appreciating what you have. It doesn't matter less or more. The best tea is always the one you're drinking now. I said there's two answers to this. The second answer is a little bit more linear, less life-related, but I would also add the clause, if you will, that to me, quality in tea has as much or more to do with the manner in which it was produced than in the way that it is drunk or consumed. In other words, I don't measure tea based on its color, aroma, flavor exclusively. Those factors obviously represent a version of quality. But focusing on that version of quality and ignoring provenance, that behavior is really what has a big part of what has gotten us in the environmental pickle that we're in right now. The provenance of something, in other words, where it comes from and how it is produced, is as relevant to its quality as its ability to bring human pleasure. It may bring some person pleasure to eat tiger steaks or shark fin soup, if you want a more realistic example. But that doesn't mean that shark fin soup is high quality, when every bowl of it causes so much environmental damage. So is the measure of something's quality completely in its ability to bring pleasure to the human senses, irrespective of how it is produced? Or is the way in which it is produced a relevant aspect of its quality? For me, it's not just relevant, it's primary. Tea is a leaf. And so the health of the leaf is the health of the forest. How do you love a leaf without loving the forest that made it? It doesn't matter what your approach is to tea. If you drink tea as a beverage or as a pastime, hobby, or as ceremonial, meditative, spiritual practice, no matter how you approach tea, this issue is relevant. If tea is a beverage for you, why wouldn't you want it to be a healthy beverage? Healthy for the earth, healthy for the farmers that produce it, and healthy for the bodies of those that consume it. Same for hobby. If you love tea, you have to love nature. Unfortunately, people miss this aspect of it, and have been for a long time. The great tea master, one of the greatest, constellation in the sky of tea, Baisao, the old tea seller, 100 centuries ago, more than 5 centuries ago, said, tea contains the essence of nature. It's too bad they prattle on and on about its color and aroma. So even obviously in his day, human beings were human beings, and prattling on and on about its color and flavor. In another of his poems, he says, prattling on about its color and flavor, you will never understand tea, because you're missing out that this leaf contains the essence of nature. That doesn't mean that the fact that it contains the essence of nature does not mean that it is not also enjoyable and pleasurable to the senses and has wonderful color and aroma, or that we should ignore those things and drink tea that tastes bad just because it was made well. But there was a time in Chinese history when tea was considered a necessity. It was one of the 7 necessities, untaxable necessities. It was a right of humans to own, amongst rice and vinegar and oil and salt, charcoal, etc. But I would argue that today, in this age, tea is much more of a luxury, really, for us. And if there ever was a time in human history when we could afford luxuries that come at the expense of the environment, this is certainly not that time. If there ever was such a time, now is certainly not it. And so for me, along with that deep spiritual lesson that the quality of tea, the best tea, is the one you're drinking now. Drinking a tea now and wishing it was some other tea or different than it is a bit like meeting a romantic partner and you don't really love them, but you think, I'll change them. And once I change them, then I'll love them. As though humans were made of clay or something, and that you have a right to do that, or that's not really love. Love is unconditional. It's only really when you fully see and understand a person's character defects that real love begins. Because out in the world, we're all so used to wearing masks and pretending and hiding our defects of character. Then when we get intimate with someone, we see all of that, and that's when real love becomes possible. Nothing is perfect. So there's 2 deep lessons in the answer of what is the best tea. The best tea is the tea that you're drinking now. Through tea, learn to appreciate what you have right here, right now. And that is a treasure that will never, ever go away. The great Zen master that said that, do you think that real joy is in success or in learning to appreciate and enjoy the effort? If you can't answer that question, you're not ready for Zen. And if you can, you've found the greatest treasure in the world, he said. So is it better to succeed or find fulfillment in the effort? So that's a deep lesson, that the best tea is the one you're drinking now, the one you're holding now, enjoying now. It will never be perfect, but yet it is perfect, perfectly imperfect. It's perfect as it is. And then there's a second aspect to quality, is that we need to learn to focus a bit more on the environment. It's not an excuse that this thing brings pleasure or more pleasure. Therefore, it's okay that it hurts the environment. This damages the health of the earth and farmers and human bodies. Oh, but it brings me more pleasure. That's not a viable argument for any responsible human being. It's not acceptable. And it's important that as tea buyers, we all be very aware of that. But I've spoken to dozens and dozens and dozens of tea farmers about how we can help to shift tea production in a more sustainable direction. And they all answer the same: you don't have to do anything with us. You educate consumers. When there is a demand for organic tea, or even better, an exclusive demand for organic tea, every farmer will shift. It's better for them, it's better for their land. And if they have to do it because that's what the market demands, of course they will. So I feel this is a very strong shift, not just one that we need to make in terms of tea, but one we need to make in terms of all products. And that shift is happening. Certainly you are more aware of the provenance of especially food products than you were 15 years ago. You read labels a lot more than you did. You're conscientious more than you were. And we need to continue to expand this. And we need to expand it into our value system, so that when we look at a product and determine which one to buy, we also include in that determination the way that it was produced and the environmental impact of that production. I can use our magazine as an example. The journey of our magazine started out as this black and white newsletter, then slowly we shifted to color cover, then a color spread on the inside, and then full color but printed on like inkjet printers. And then we went to a kind of, we were so small that it was hard to get a bigger printer to even do our job, but through a local print shop we were able to get them to do it. But it still, and it looked nice, but it wasn't, for me, it was still very low quality because it didn't include the environment. It didn't include that aspect of it. And so for me, the dream was to reach where we are now, where we could print the magazine in a way that's beautiful, the photography looks beautiful, but the paper's all second to fourth generation recycled paper, and it's 100% organic, non-GMO, soy-based ink. So it's all in all, it's pretty, but it's also made in a way that is sustainable as much as possible. And that element is important. That's why I think packaging is important in tea. My teacher always said, right, the more packaging, usually, of course, there's exceptions, and always on both sides, but he used to say if you walk into like a tea shop that you've never been in, usually more packaging, lower quality tea. Because good tea speaks for itself. They brew it for you. The tea speaks for itself. Simple brown bag, cost a couple cents. Doesn't matter to the tea lover. We take it home. I'd rather have simple brown bags around that are recycled and recyclable, or at least simple. This is a hard balance in this case as well, because you get into paper, it can have a smell. And so often they have to be lined with that foil stuff, and then there's issues. It's hard to sort it out. But you don't, if you spend lots on packaging, you spend whatever, $10 on some packaging, then you have to pass that on to the cost, and it's a cost that's a waste. So we want to keep things simple. These are just small examples, but Always, on the back end and the front end, it's the responsibility of ethical business people and ethical customers to include these decisions in their value system. These are kind of the two facets of, for me, what quality means in tea. But on a more spiritual, direct, actual level, the best tea is the one that you have right now. Thank you. Let's shift and answer some questions.
Questions from one of the viewers. Can you share thoughts on finding or creating one's life path? How to find one's calling and serve others in a meaningful way?
So this was how to essentially find your Tao in life, your purpose, your calling. I think, especially for young people, it's very important to shop around. The thing that you love, your passion, what will bring you bliss will be probably the thing that you will use as your instrument to express your Tao to the world as well. So not so much what brings you pleasure, but what deep down brings you bliss will be the instrument that you use to express your highest self. And finding that thing is part practice, listening, intuition, calming down, part trying different things, and part destiny. The destiny of things. The best you can do is to cultivate yourself so that you attract such things into your life. It's, I guess, analogous to like a romantic partner. There are billions of people. Which one should I be with, right? Number one, I wouldn't seek too much. Just cultivate yourself. The more cultivated you are, the more you'll attract the person that you need. But part of that will also just be destiny and chance, chaos, whatever you want to call it, and meeting different things. But and part also like dating, trying. So go out and date different Taos, different practices. It's also part fate, and then it's also just continue to cultivate yourself so that you'll recognize it when it does come. And there's a kind of, a love, a passion that just grows and grows and grows like a good marriage. My teacher still, even after 50 years of tea, he always says, I'm still crazy after all these years. I still just fall more and more in love. I found that to be true in my case too. So that which brings you that deep, deep bliss and satisfaction will be the thing that once you become more and more skilled at it, that you will use to also express yourself to others and to serve. You'll be able to serve in that way better than other ways because you love it, right? So someone who, and that doesn't have to be something magical. Someone who just, again, makes cabinets. I talk about this every week. It's an example that I love. Cabinet making comes from one of my favorite books. So cabinet making could be done for money. And then cabinet making could be done for a love of cabinet making. And there are people who love making cabinets. I have a uncle, not by blood. He's one of my father's best friends since before I was born. But we grew up calling him uncle. And he was a cabinet maker. Loves making cabinets. It wasn't even his job. It was what he did in his free time, out of passion. And everybody who sees the cabinets that they make, if you go into a house where he made the cabinets, it's the first thing everybody says something about. Look at those cabinets. So the thing that you love will always serve better because it will be made to a higher standard, because it will be made with love. It will have a greater impact on others. Things that are made with love will come from a place of stillness, and they will lead others to stillness, and they will inspire others because they were made with inspiration. I hope that helps. But listen is the first thing. Listen, calm down, cultivate yourself, be ready. Otherwise, you'll walk right by. You have to be paying attention, right? I watched a film that was made by some friends in California. That was it was very quick. It was like a 5-minute film, but it was very powerful. It was like this couple walking down the road, they bump, and then you get like a montage, like a 1-minute montage of their whole life. They start dating, they get married, they move in, they have children, the children grow up, the children go off to college and go traveling, then they get old, and then he's laying dying and she's like holding his hand and crying. And it's just this montage of all these beautiful memories. And then the film very quickly rewinds back to that moment when they were walking on the street. And this time, they're both looking at their cell phones and they walk right by each other. Until all of that potential was lost because they weren't paying attention.
Harry's asking, how will the current situation affect the tea production over the next year?
How will the current situation affect tea production over the next year? Oh, well, obviously, it's going to affect for sure. I think some tea farming even was like set down, or there'll be a lot less, so prices will go up. Certainly. I think distribution will also be an issue. These are kind of the two main areas where I think you're going to see an effect. Prices will be higher due to lower quantities and distribution issues. Hopefully distribution issues will be resolved in the next few months as things begin to open up and shipping channels open up. Those will be the main aspects of this, though. In terms of nature, actually all of this is having a tremendously positive influence. In fact, there's a study done by a Taiwanese fellow that is not peer-reviewed. I don't have any idea if the science holds up, but the ideas that it suggests are worth pondering. As part of what we're sitting around pondering during this time, this is yet another idea worth pondering. So if the statistics in the study, if I'm misquoting them or if they are just not factual, I don't know. I cannot verify. But it was a short article. What I read was actually probably a summary of a study. And it suggested that actually the COVID-19 shutdown in China saved more lives than it cost. It's crazy. But the article had data to back up this argument. Again, the validity of the argument doesn't really matter to me because the ideas are still worth pondering even if it's not valid. But why? Because the shutdown over those couple months reduced the air and water pollution in China so much that millions of people will now live. In other words, he had a statistic that proved that every month of air pollution above a certain level kills X amount of people over time. And so that number of mortality was higher than the amount of people that died in China from COVID-19. So in other words, the lifting of all that air pollution was saving more lives than the COVID-19 was costing. And just yesterday, I also saw a picture, side-by-side pictures of New Delhi right now and pre-COVID-19. In terms of air pollution, they had side-by-side pictures, and right now it's clear. So this stop is also giving us a glimpse into the environmental impact of all it is that we're doing. And so potentially these couple months of growth of tea in China with an incredible decrease in air pollution and water pollution might result in a better crop of tea than we've seen in decades. And it's crazy, but it's possible, depending on the region and other factors. But those ideas are worth contemplating.
Mika is asking, what is a good balance between meditation, tea ceremony practice, and qigong in Chadao?
And what is a good balance between practices of meditation, tea, and movement? All three. I don't understand. Is a question in terms of amount? Daily, all three. They are all three parts of my day. So I meditate every morning, evening. I drink tea every day. I do movement every day. These are all areas of practice. And they're not separate. They're not really compartments. They're one and the same. They inform and become each other. Staying balanced in all of those is very important. Movement, exercise is fundamental. We can invest. We can invest, I think, too much in that one. That one is the one where I balance. You mentioned Qigong, and that's more of a spiritual movement, so limitless. But in terms of exercise, right? Investing energy in exercise to have a healthy body is obviously very important. But the purpose of having a healthy body is to live a healthy, happy life. So if we're just taking all the energy that we get from having a healthy body and reinvesting it in getting a healthy body, is like having a very expensive violin and then never playing it. Just continuing to polish it so that you can have an expensive violin, so that you can polish it, so that you can have an expensive violin, so that, right, having a healthy body so that you can use that healthy body to have a healthy body, so that you can use that healthy body to spend all your energy making a healthy body, is like a little bit of a hamster wheel. Certainly investing energy in having a healthy body is incredible. It's wonderful. There's a lot of benefits in having a healthy body in terms of quality of life, longevity of life. All of those things are relevant. But you can overinvest in that, I think. And it's easy to do because it feels good, etc. But what is overinvesting is individual. Depends how much time you have in the day. I certainly wouldn't exercise at the expense of my spiritual practice. I wouldn't create physical well-being at the expense of spiritual well-being. They're one and the same. It's all one system.
Claudia is asking, what makes tea practice different to simply tea drinking with an expensive tea set?
What makes tea practice different than tea drinking with an expensive tea set? I don't know that the expensive tea set has any relevance to the question. I think you can just say, what's the difference between tea drinking and tea ceremony? The expensive tea set part, I'm not sure how that's relevant to the question. If you have an expensive tea set or not, you can be tea drinking or practicing tea ceremony. So in other words, you can tea drink with an expensive tea set or a cheap one. You can also do tea ceremony with an expensive tea set or a cheap one. So the cost of one's tea set is not really relevant to the pith of your question, which is what's the difference between tea drinking and tea ceremony. It's a very difficult question to answer that we could talk weeks about. If I had to boil it down as simply as possible, I would say intention. What's the difference between a church and the building next to it? Right? It's the intention with which it was built, the intention, the purpose for which it was built, but then ultimately also the intention of all the hearts that go into that church and pray. So it's the intention with which it was built, the intention and purpose that is used for, and then the intention of each of all the individuals that go there, right? I think when churches, for example, become tourist sites, sometimes it's not necessarily a bad thing. First of all, it raises money and allows the church to maintain itself. Second of all, it allows more people to enjoy maybe some of the art and beauty of that place. But when you do that, you then introduce a whole bunch of people who are coming to that church not to worship, but to look at it and take pictures. And that impacts lots of things. One of my favorite churches is like that. And so as a result, like there's big signs. It's in Spain. There's big signs, like I think 3 or 4 layers of these signs of like no cell phones, no pictures. Big sign. No pictures. Big sign. No pictures. And then they even have dudes that like walk around, and they have to have dudes that walk around because even despite those pictures, there's still everybody is just taking pictures. And that's obviously disturbing the peace of those who have come there to pray. So you can see that, like in that the intention of the people that are using that building is not, they don't have a sacred intention, And so as a result, that the amplification, I guess, of that sacred energy is weakened by that. I don't know if that analogy holds up. It's the best I can do in a quick amount of time, very quickly. It's, the intention, basically, is what makes it ceremony as opposed to tea drinking. So when space is held as sacred space, it becomes sacred space. It's really that kind of simple. It's because it's a practice of cultivating myself more than it is even really cultivating the space. This is where the two analogies separate between the church and the tea practice. The practice of tea as a ceremony, as a self-cultivation, what I'm cultivating is myself, not my teaware. So the most influential factor in that is my own mind, my own state of mind, my own heart-mind. In Chinese, it's just one word, Xin, heart-mind, so heart-mind. This one system. So my heart-mind, my orientation, my attitude, my approach, right, creates the tea that will, it's like a feedback loop. The more I prepare tea with that intention, the more that tea will remind myself and others of that intention, and then that will enhance that intention in me, so that the next time I make tea, I will make it more with more of that. And right, but what I'm trying to cultivate, what I'm trying to change is myself. And of course, when I start to serve, I want to help change others as well. But for the purpose of self-cultivation, what I'm trying to cultivate is myself, not the tea, not the pot, not the stuff around me. So, of course, my mind and my approach is the greatest factor. And I think it's the greatest factor even in the more material ways of measuring the quality of tea. Even in terms of aroma, fragrance, the one who is mindful and focused and reverent will bring out the best subtleties from the tea as well. On the physical side, they will be more skilled, because the highest levels of skill in any art, be it music or painting or whatever, come from degrees of sensitivity that are only available to the quiet heart, to the quiet mind. And so when I approach the space with reverence, with that intention, right, it becomes a reverent space in my mind for me. And that reverence changes then my experience of that space. And my experience of that space then changes me. And so on and so on. And this is the real kind of basics of it. Whereas I think tea drinking is something more casual. Tea drinking is something that happens in cafes and kitchens and restaurants. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not all that life transformative. Sitting around and comparing flavors, and as Baisao said, prattling on about the color and aroma of tea and missing that it's the essence of nature, it's not a sin. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just superficial. The punishment for superficiality is superficiality. It's not that you are superficial, therefore you're a bad person. We're all superficial at times and in areas of our life. The punishment for that is superficiality. That's it. You just miss out, basically. There's the essence of nature, and you missed out on it because you were prattling on about its flavor and aroma. Ultimately, though, in terms of the transformation of the heart-mind, the transformation of the way that I live, sitting around and drinking tea and discussing its flavors and aromas, and then picking up my cell phone and Facebooking and having chats and all that, putting snacks on the table, that's a fine pastime for spending time with friends. But there's no real difference qualitatively in terms of cultivation, in terms of mental, spiritual transformation. There's no difference between that and going around to all the Italian restaurants in Taipei and tasting their marinara sauce and saying, oh, this one has a little more garlic. Oh, they put cinnamon in this one. And there's no difference, really. That also, there's nothing wrong with that activity either. It's just not that transformative. So the intention really is everything. But I don't see anything wrong with tea drinking. In my tradition, though, we have a saying that as the person seeks the leaf seeks the person. So earlier we were talking about the quality of tea. I think it's very relevant to your approach. Because if you put tea in a mug and watch TV, there's nothing wrong with that. But then the quality of tea that's going to find its way to your life is the kind of tea that belongs in a mug as somebody watches TV. That's the very. If you go to someone's house who puts tea in a mug and watches TV, and you say, "Show me what tea you have," they're going to open their cupboard and show you the tea that they have, the tea that they use to put in a mug as they watch TV, and you're going to see that the tea that they have is a tea of the quality that belongs in a mug while somebody watches TV. Of course it is. Right? So this is going to influence the way that you gather things to you. It also will influence, even on a sensual level, your ability to appreciate tea. Because the more quiet and still and sensitive you are, the more aromas and flavors you're going to experience. Tea, in other words, even on a visceral, sensual level, is going to reward you for your quietude and stillness of mind. You're going to experience more. In fact, often when people start meditating and drinking tea in silence, just in silence even, without the meditation, people will just start drinking tea in silence when before they were talking and passing the cookies around and da-da-da-da-da. When they start drinking tea in silence, the tea that they themselves have been drinking for years, all of a sudden, they're like, oh, I never noticed the in this tea. Right? That goes for anything, right? If you're busy, you don't notice so much. So quieting down, you are rewarded even sensually in your experience of the tea. So in all these ways, there's nothing wrong with tea drinking. I do some tea drinking. Certainly tea is a beverage to me as well as a hobby as well. I do some of that tea drinking. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not primary. It's not what's most important for me. What's most important, what's primary in tea is that it contains the essence of nature.
Rich Allen asks, do you have any practical advice on how to manage our thoughts or feelings of craving when we're consumed by that desire for more or something else that we currently have?
So the question is, how do we deal with the thoughts of craving when, as we're learning, we have to learn to appreciate what we have. The ego is a trickster. It sells us fix-all solutions. That's what it does. It's a salesman, a really good one, right? In terms of relationships with others, in terms of situations, and in terms of like craving products, it sells us this like fix-all solution. If I only, in that moment of craving, like in that moment of like a particular tea, even, it's like if I only had that tea, all would be well. It's a like cure-all, snake oil, right? If you just had this one thing, all would be well, right? So you have to like learn to get some distance from the thoughts, and that comes through. You have to be patient. You can't force these things. You can't, beat yourself up or feel guilty. You have to just be very patient, and these practices work very gradually. You can't be in a hurry, and the ego will continue to swindle you. You have to, but as you meditate more, you get some more distance from your thoughts, and you don't take them so seriously. But that happens over years or even decades, and so very slowly you start to have distance from your thoughts. They start to have less sway. You start to get a like funny attitude towards them, right? Because those salesmen are foolish, and they're kind of silly, and there's a silliness to them. One of my all-time favorite scenes from any movie ever is from The Outlaw Josie Wales. It's a spaghetti western. I like the spaghetti westerns. I grew up watching them with my father. Kung fu movies and spaghetti westerns were my whole. I didn't have much TV in my house. We weren't allowed to watch too much TV. Just an hour and a half, sometimes a little more each week. And I spent it almost all on Kung Fu double feature. But I was sometimes watch westerns with my dad. But The Outlaw Josie Wales, go watch it. It's a really great one. It's Clint Eastwood. It's one in which he is kind of in most of them, he plays this like good bad guy. This like anti-hero kind of. Anyway, the scene relates to this. There's this salesman in this really white, shiny suit, and he's selling some kind of like snake oil, some kind of oil that cures everything. And he's like, this can cure the cold. It can make your hair grow. It can blah, 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 blah. It can make you happy. It can blah, blah, blah. He's just going on and on about how this little oil does everything. And the outlaw Josie Wells is riding by on his horse. And the man starts giving him this sales pitch. He's like, sir, you should buy this. It can blah, 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 it can blah, 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 blah. And he just leans over and spits a giant wad of nasty tobacco onto the man's white suit and says to him, how's it for stains? And I love that I love that scene. I don't know why I thought of it just now, but in how it relates, that analogy, go watch the movie though. That scene's incredible. There's some other funny scenes in that movie that are awesome too. There's a Native American in there that has some really great one-liners as well throughout the movie that are kind of deep and also funny and beautiful. But that salesman in that funny white suit selling snake oil. Why is it a good analogy? Because because it's easy to see the humor in his sales pitch. It's easy to see through it and not fall for it. Partly because his sales pitch comes from a simpler time. And because it comes from a simpler time, for us, you might think, what kind of idiots bought that stuff? Nobody would buy that stuff now. Well, that's easy for you to say, right? At that time, we have the equivalent of that now. At that time, there were people that would fall for that. They didn't understand so much about medicine. They used leeches and other bleeding methods and things. They didn't understand so much about the human body. So of course they would fall for that. But because it's from another time, it seems so simple and obvious, the scam, right? And so my analogy is this: just as when you look back at a 19th century scam of a guy in a white suit selling a bottle of snake oil, and he just looks funny, he's silly, right? In the same way, the more you meditate, it's almost like, my analogy is perfect. The more you meditate, the more time passes away, and the more the sales pitches of the ego become like that, silly, haha, and you just spit on them and say, how's it for stains? Or don't, you just laugh. Like the ideas that your ego sells to you, instead of being able to manipulate you, they start to take on this kind of funny hue, right? Especially in their all-encompassing power. As I said, the ego's solutions are always fix all. They're always these grand solutions that fix everything. And as a result of becoming hypnotized by these solutions and having tunnel vision and focusing and working just towards the ego's solutions, we become blinded to all kinds of things, including the fact that myopia makes it impossible for us to step back and acknowledge or understand the ego's motives for that solution, which are almost always childish and immature, which means that usually that solution is not even really what's good for us. And so to wrap your question up, right, you're asking, how do I learn how to appreciate what I have? The answer is really a catch-22. You learn to appreciate what you have by learning to appreciate what you have. Right? So the best way to work with kleshas, which are defects of character, is not to fight them, but to pursue the good with determination. You don't defeat darkness by fighting it. You defeat darkness by pursuing the light with determination. So the more you appreciate tea in this moment, and appreciate, this sip, this bowl, this place, put your hands together, say some gratitude. The more you appreciate what you have, you are training yourself to appreciate what you have. It's a practice in appreciating what you have. It's a practice in being present here and now and loving onto what you are experiencing right now. The more you practice that, the more you will learn to appreciate what you have. And then you will stop buying into the ego's sales ploys that if only you got X, you would appreciate what you have. So the best tea is always the one you have right here now. And drink it like that, in that spirit. Be conscious. in your practice, in your tea. Be conscious. And that will start to slowly steep into other areas of your life. And slowly you will learn how to appreciate what you have. But you're going to have to combat lots of habit energy. Both your own habit energy that you have built over years and also the detritus of collective habit energy that has been encultured/socialized into you. You have been trained by a society that is fundamentally from the ground up built on a principle of the not here now but there then mind. Of the if I only got X, I would learn how to appreciate what I have. The entire economy moves on that frustration. If that frustration were not there, the entire economy would collapse. Because if you think about it, if there was a product that actually caused satisfaction, it actually taught people to appreciate what they have, everybody would buy that product and then be done buying and not buy anything else, and the entire economy would shut down. The economy functions because the thing that you buy does not teach you to appreciate what you have. It lasts for just a minute, the gratification, or a little bit longer, whatever the time frame. It's a short time frame, or even a little bit longer, but it's some finite time period. And then boom, starts the, if I only had an X, I would be able to appreciate what I have. So you've been trained by that. And so your training has to go against that training that you already had. And that's what practice is that. But you don't need to fight it. You just pursue the light. You just pursue a mind of appreciating what you have. And in doing so, you will learn to stop not appreciating what you have. Which brings me back to the simple, vacuous statement, right? You learn to appreciate what you have by learning to appreciate what you have. I know that's tautological, but it can be practiced. I think that's the time that we have for today. I really enjoy spending these tea moments with you guys, drinking tea, learning together every month. I hope that these ideas, these philosophies and thoughts result in actual insights, result in questions. Remember, I keep repeating this all the time. Teachings to me. And it's important to know my motivations and my perspectives for why I am teaching. Because if you're not aware of my motivations and perspectives for why I'm teaching, then the teachings might not land properly in your bowl. So it's very important you understand my motivations for offering these teachings so that you can receive them properly. The motivations that I have for giving these teachings has nothing to do with arguments or stances about reality. This is the way it is. This is the way you should do it. I don't have any stance. I'm not offering a stance. So you can't argue with me. This is not a debate. You are more than welcome to disagree. But there's no need for that because I'm not telling you how it is. What teachings are to me is invitations to explore. They are questions. They are opportunities to get up from this recording and go and ask questions, ponder things, think about things, and hopefully also act on those contemplations. Act on those questions. That's what teachings are to me. Invitations to explore. Invitations for you to explore what truth is to you. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.